And now I knew if I had my chains that I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy for a while.
I don't tend to think of White House state dinners as Karaoke Wednesday, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, South Korea's president is actually engaged here in a very shrewd, very adorable, yes, but very clever and intentional charm offensive. And that he's doing it through song may be more meaningful than anyone might give him credit for.
Well, the Bowery's willow bright, something touched me deep inside. The day the music died.
The arts are a major source of pride and prestige for South Korea. You know, Netflix actually just announced a whopping $2.5 billion over 4 years to produce original South Korean TV and film for a global audience. Squid Game, the most watched series ever on Netflix. All of Us Are Dead, a zombie thriller that debuted in Netflix's global top 10. The Glory, Kill Boksoon, Physical 100, all of these have had outstanding global viewership. So how'd they do it?
부잣집 과예요. 돈도 많이 줘.
이댁 식구들 참 잘 속아, 그지?
Any critic will tell you, Parasite was a rather clever bit of bridge building to a North American audience.
와, 이것 좀 한번 보세요들. 우리도 이 속도라면 오늘 중에 이거 다 끝낼 수 있을 것 같은데? 와, 오늘 돈 다 받는 거죠?
이 서서 하는구나. 이게
아우, 얘는 달인이구만. 뭐야, 소독해?
요즘도 저런 걸 하네.
그러게요.
창문 닫아.
나도 봐. 공짜로 집안에 소독도 하고 곱등도 없애고.
그래. 요새 곱등이 너무 많아.
It's basically the story of a poor family's wild scheme to infiltrate a rich family, except it goes horribly wrong. And somehow, oddly, it's a story we can all relate to.
왜냐하면 우리가 하나의 나라에서 살고 있다. 지금 하나의 거대한 나라, 자본주의라는 나라인 거죠.
And in the end, it might have been much harder to follow in Parasite's footsteps, if not for an actual global catastrophe 6 months later.
First, we have an update on the spread of the deadly coronavirus.
Good evening. As we come on the air in the West tonight, President Trump addressing the American people just a short time ago as the toll of the coronavirus widens here in the U.S.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
COVID was brutal for so much of the world, but for those industries that benefit from people staying home, it was a stroke of luck.
Jim, here's a company that's actually benefiting from the pandemic with millions of people following stay-at-home orders. Netflix is reporting a surge in subscriptions.
South Korea's response to COVID was one of the most successful planet-wide. Large-scale testing, a massive vaccination campaign. Their cumulative per capita death rate held impressively low, meaning it wasn't the virus, but rather their TV and film industry that spread like wildfire.
Now, with the show that everyone's talking about, it's called Squid Game. It's a violent thriller from South Korea.
Squid Game is a universal hit. Netflix predicts there's a very good chance it's going to be our biggest show ever.
Please welcome to The Late Show, Lee Jung-jae.
The industry was firing on all cylinders, and by this time, it had hit on a winning formula. Stories of life, death, hope, set against a dystopian backdrop in the midst of real-world despair.
You may not think about a show like Squid Game as a melodrama, but when you think about how it's structured, it really does use a strong emotional connection. I would say that South Korean media producers have really honed that format and made it really addictive.
But let's talk about money. The Korean government has for some time thought of its TV and film industry not just as art, but as an export.
So for the last 15 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, the culture industries or content industries have been designated as a strategic sector for development.
And 2020, the year before Squid Game, South Korea saw the biggest investment ever into its culture ministry, the equivalent of around $6.5 billion Canadian. Last year, that amount went even higher to more than $7 billion. And from the industry point of view, between tax breaks, lower wages, and well-established infrastructure, producing in South Korea is actually relatively cheap. This period piece from a few years ago, Mr. Sunshine, took us back to 1871. You know, beautiful cinematography, sets, costumes, the works. Cost around $30 million US to make. A comparable show like Bridgerton, maybe, you know, shot in the UK, cost almost 4 times that amount. But let's set aside money. What may have really primed North American audiences for South Korean culture
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
So, you know, I remember the first time I heard this song, and I remember being like, what is this? You know, it felt exotic, but familiar. You know, weird, but in a good way, and just catchy as hell. First YouTube video ever to hit 1 billion views. And notice the use of English. Again, a very intentional attempt to break into North America. For the catchiest part of the song, no subtitles needed. And yes, you know, we could keep talking about South Korean influence. Everything from soju to Samsung. And yes,
this is not something that just occurred out of the blue or all of a sudden. It's the outcome of decades, actually, of investment and prioritization of Korean content industries. K-pop is a huge industry and, in fact, has probably been more significant in monetary terms and in the way that it is a growth sector of the Korean economy and how it drives tourism, how it drives consumption of Korean cultural contents than, you know, television or even cinema.
So we can see now how the entertainment powerhouse that is South Korea took shape. Maybe with a bit of luck, but very much a calculated play, conceived with as much intention as ingenuity. And, you know, I haven't even gotten to the biggest part of this story, because this wave of Korean success isn't just about money and fame and fun. It's about power.
I think that the concept of soft power is a helpful framework for thinking about, for instance, why Ted Sarandos of Netflix was meeting with the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, during a state visit, right? That there's this way that culture industries are not totally separate from the way that the South Korean state is negotiating and operating.
These words come direct from a former South Korean foreign affairs minister. Along with diplomatic efforts focused on national defense in the 1980s and the economy and trade in the 1990s, culture will be the third pillar of diplomatic power in the 21st century.
South Korea, even though it's a rather small country, can be a major player in economic and cultural terms. So I think that this soft power goal is quite, it's quite explicit in the case of the South Korean government supporting culture industries.
This is the influence of attraction. We as humans are more likely to help and do business with people we like. So next time you're in Seoul's Olympic Park and you see a disturbingly large Squid Game doll statue, Now you know the backstory of how South Korea has worked so hard to pull audiences in, while every so often, even the president himself reaches out to those of us on the other side.
Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.